Portugal the Place. We are really excited to be starting our webinar tonight with our guest from Alesco. We're going to give everyone a moment to get logged in. If you have logged in, please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from, and we'd love to know how many children you have that you're considering, for schools, if they're young, if they're teenagers. So if you want to share in the chat, where you're from right now and what your family dynamic looks like, that would be great. We're going to give you a minute to get signed in, and then we'll get started. So it's wonderful that we're here tonight. Thank you so much again for your patience for rescheduling too, Josephine. I know that we had to do a reschedule, so thank you so much.
Of course, you're welcome.
All right, so we're going to start. We're just going to give another minute or so for people to get logged in so that everybody can get settled in, and then we will get started for sure. And if you are not able to join us live, this is definitely going to be available and recorded and sent out to everyone that registered. So that'll be an option as well. But we're really excited to be able to talk about education in Portugal. Hello, hi from New York. So thank you so much. Great to have you here. Thanks for signing in. So, and we have from Austin, Texas, 2 boys. Fantastic. I love it when we start to get people from all over the place. Hey, Jessica. Hi. Wonderful. So glad to have you here. All right. So we are, you know what? I think we can go ahead and get started. So tonight, we are so excited to be speaking with our partner, Alesco and Josephine, who are working with us to help people navigate the education system in Portugal. Specifically tonight, we're really going to focus on children that may have some additional support needs. So we're really excited to have our guest who specializes in just that. So Josephine, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do with Alesco and how that all works?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so happy to be here, to share my passion about special needs and inclusive education. And it's always so valuable to get the insights and the concerns from parents, that helps me a lot in my work. So I'm a special needs coordinator at an international school in Portugal, but I'm also a consultant for Alesco, especially for the special needs education. I've been working in special needs and inclusion my whole life. I've worked in South Africa, New Zealand, and now I'm, honored to work in Portugal. And Portugal is very unique, when it comes to special needs education, and we'll talk about this. So I'm really happy to share all my insights, and answer all the questions. And I've been in Portugal for almost 2 years, and I've got to work with a lot of people, lots of great people, and gained a lot of insights on how the education system works, specifically about special needs.
And you were saying you're doing your master's out of the UK right now, correct?
Yes, exactly. And that helps a lot to get that international perspective. UK is a great country when it comes to special needs education. So I really gain valuable insights daily, and I connect it with my work I do in the school every day. So that's really great.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to dig in with some of the questions that I know that we get from a lot of our clients. We have so many folks that are, organizing their journey to Portugal. They're getting ready to move. And when you have children that have different support plans in place or learning needs, that's one of the very first questions that we get. So I think I'm going to start with a really blanket question that almost every single person asks. If you have a child that has some type of special need, is Portugal welcoming? Is it possible to navigate the school systems here, different types of education, with a child that may present with certain support needs like that?
Yeah, absolutely. What I love about Portugal, it has one of the most progressive, inclusive frameworks, like the actual law when it comes to special needs education. It has 98.9% of students with special needs are enrolled in mainstream schools. That's like very impressive numbers, and disabilities groups, and communities, they've been asking for inclusive education for years, So I'm really happy that Portugal is a country, that embraces that and started super early in their journey, to have all students enrolled in mainstream schools. So I would say in general they're very welcoming. There's little discrimination. Everybody is entitled to different support measurements, according to their needs. So it's really great. It's a very great country when it comes to that.
That's fantastic. So you say that almost 100% of children with special needs are enrolled in the mainstream school programs. How does that work for international students that are coming with the additional layer of the language barrier?
Yeah, so with international students, it depends on which school or school where you want to go. You can go the international route, which means you have to apply and enroll to the international schools that are in Portugal. The tricky thing with the international schools is that they don't have to take you, right? So it's,
Right.
you have to pay for them. They don't have to take you. It doesn't matter if you have special needs or not, right? A few schools have very long waiting lists, so it depends on many factors. If you already have a sibling at the school, you get preferred. All of this plays into account. If you go the public route, there is support for students who don't speak Portuguese as the mother language. The classes are quite good. Of course, it always depends on the area. It always depends on the school, how it is implemented and how much resources they have. But the especially Portuguese additional language support can be quite good at public schools as well. And the law is the same, for public schools and international schools, pretty much.
So if you were a parent of a child with special needs in the classroom, it sounds like they have support and they have support for the language side. What is it like as a parent to interact with the administration or the teachers without having the language?
Yeah, that can be quite difficult. It depends on the team, and the teacher, if they speak English or not. If not, and I always advise to take a translator with you actually at some point, or a good friend, who might be able to help to translate, just to avoid any miscommunication, misunderstanding about the situations. Because you want to be really clear about your child's situation. You want to be really clear of what you get also, what you're entitled to. For some things, you might have to ask a little bit more, if you're aware of certain support strategies that are so good for your kid, you might have to go for it and ask for it if the school doesn't provide it. So if the language barrier is there, I would always, ask for help. It's so easy to ask for help, and it connects you with other people as well. So I would definitely go that route.
It's part of that. So if you had a child that you were looking at enrolling into the school system, and let's for conversations stay on the public school system, because international school is such a different approach. Is there any restrictions or things that pop to mind that seem significantly different than what you've experienced with Americans in particular, such as medical need distribution, like medicines during the day, or support for physical disabilities and access? Is there a possibility for shadow teachers and tutors? We get requested that a lot as well.
Yeah. So unfortunately, physical disabilities and health needs and so on is a topic that's not well covered in the public schools, to be honest. The buildings are responsibility of the municipalities, not of the Ministry of Education. So they're often poorly funded. You often don't have a wheelchair access and so on. But you get addressed to public schools by address. If you have special needs, most of the times you get it referred to the reference school. It's called like the reference school, which is the school that gets the most resources from the inclusion centers, which were former special needs schools. So they provide the support for the reference schools in that term. They are able to provide speech therapy or occupational therapy or whatever it is, but it really depends on the resources and the school, how much resources they ask for it. So it's a bit of a tricky topic to be honest when it comes to physical disabilities. But the resource centers as well They provide adapted sports program, for example. There is something that's called the school clusters. They're a group of schools that they work together, and they are responsible for extracurricular activities and defining them and providing them. And they work together with the resource centers as well. So there's always the opportunity to go into that and to enroll into that special sports program, for example, that adapted sports program. It's a bit of a bureaucratic hassle, to be honest, to find your way through the jungle. But once you get the hang of it, it's really great.
So Kelly has a question here. Their child has ADHD and will be a first-year university student. She does not speak Portuguese. We are very concerned about education options for her age. This is our biggest obstacle to feeling good about the move. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so in university, it's a bit of a different topic. They expect the students to be quite independent already, and there is little support when it comes to Portuguese as additional language. There are some courses that are in English, especially more in the bigger cities, Lisbon, Porto. But it really depends, what her interest is. I can only advise try to get her starting to speak Portuguese, taking courses as soon as you can, because language is the base for everything. As far as the ADHD is concerned, there's not much support when it comes to university. You might be able to get some extra time, for the tests. Normally an extra room, unfortunately, is not provided, but the extra time is valuable for sure. But of course, you need to provide reports and everything. The thing is with ADHD, if you're well medicated, it's great. But if you're coming from the US, you might not be able to get the same medication in Portugal. Especially, the last few months, there was quite a shortage when it comes to ADHD medication. So especially when you make the first move and you need to find a psychiatrist and everything here in Portugal to get your medicine, prescribed, I always advise take the biggest supply, which is normally 3 months, from the US with you, that you're covered for the first period.
Absolutely. And I think to piggyback on that a little bit, we've had a lot of 18, 19-year-olds that are transitioning over and moving over. And we have found some success on that level of the first year kind of university side with smaller certification programs like hospitality programs, working within the different, there's different levels here. And I think that folks in the States are very fixated on the fact that there's like a 4-year degree and a master's degree and that kind of thing. Whereas here, the certification programs like within the hospitality tracks are taught in English because that's the language of that that type of work. So there are some options outside of a traditional 4-year university that can accelerate them and keep them in school. So we've had that experience too. Have you seen that as well, Josephine? Have you had?
Absolutely. What I work, because I'm more in the school environment, but I know that there are these options, and they're fantastic, because a 4-year program is also long, especially if you come new to the country. So it's a very good option, just to get settled in. And you can always still consider the 4-year program later,
and
for a later
off
stage.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's really helpful. It looks like Emma is talking about their son is 8 and autistic and ADHD diagnosed. In the UK, he has an EHCP. Would this be transferred to an IEP in Portugal? Also, in mainstream school, is support teacher available? That shadow teacher or support teacher that we were talking about.
Yes, exactly. So public schools, they are not super happy about having a shadow teacher in class full time. Even if you offer to pay for it yourself, they are not really happy to have an outside person inside the school, and they don't necessarily provide one. They always try to make it work within the school, within the class, without an extra person. But you will have support. Some schools have teacher assistants inside the classroom. You get support from the resource centers who might go into the school twice, 3 times a week, to take a student out. Although, of course, the preference is always to support the child inside the classroom, just because that's, Portugal has the law that they try to have this inclusive environment. And that's the support teacher is not really available in public schools. And even in international schools, they are a bit critical about that. There are a lot of schools who take shadow teachers, but there might be, you know, a limited number for the whole school because they don't want too many outside persons, and it would always be the parents' responsibility to pay for it. As far as the IEP is concerned, just because I see it there, well, in Portugal, first, before you get an individual education plan, you get a support measurement document, you know, to get all the support measurements that the child is entitled to put into that document. Later on, only if the child needs significant curricular adaptations, you know, which is the third level of support that's possible, then you will get what is called an individual education plan, and that will set specific goals for that specific students. But before that, like level 1 and level 2 support would be called like a support measurement document.
So what Emma's asking here about the EHCP from the UK doesn't automatically transfer. There's another process that will come through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you would have to bring all your diagnoses, you know, if you go to public school, you would have to translate them all to Portuguese. And then they are, you know, given to the school, and the school assigns all the resources and draws up the support measurement document together with the multidisciplinary team at the school, and provides the document. And I always tell parents, go in and talk about that document. It's so important, you know, because, you know, funding is limited in Portugal, resources are limited, and you can always push a little bit for more, to be honest. You can always go that, you know, as a parent, go that extra mile to give your kid that extra push. So yeah, I would always go in and talk to the teachers about that document.
Absolutely. So you were talking about a variety of levels of schools, and before I jump into Sienna's question here, I just wanted to clarify, because I think this is really important for folks. They may not understand that. Early on, you were talking about the change that they made from special needs schools to the support that they're providing, and how that kind of, you move through it pretty quickly. And I was hoping maybe you could bounce back a little and talk about what those different type of support schools support. You were saying if the school they were next to with the address, they would be referred to like a resource school. What does that mean? Can you break that down?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've had in Portugal before, you know, the decree law 54 was, you know, implemented from 2008, you had special needs schools, like it was an exclusive system. And once that law came into place in 2008, those special needs schools were advised to form themselves into resource centers. Okay, so the special needs schools were resolved. You had only mainstream schools, and mainstream schools, they organize themselves in school clusters. So they group up, you know, 4 to 8 schools normally. They build a group, you know, to support each other. They have a leadership team. They define extracurricular activities for that school group. And within that school group, you always have one reference school. And that reference school, that only means that that school gets the most support from one of the resource centers assigned. There are about 110 resource centers, I think, across Portugal, and they support the public schools. You know, each resource centers is assigned to different public schools and different groups of the schools. So each reference school in one of those groups means that they have the most support. And if you have a child with special needs, you know, it will most likely get enrolled in that reference school if there is place. Normally, it would go, if you don't have a kid with special needs, it would go strictly by address area. So if you live in a specific area, you will get assigned to that special schools. You can give, I think, a preference for 3 schools, but you don't have much control over it, so you will get assigned. But if you have a child with special needs, you will most likely get assigned to that reference school, which might not be the closest school, but has more support.
Perfect. All right. So I think we can pop in there for Sienna. So what about children who are non-speaking? How do you even start to identify what schools have the most resources? My son can walk, but can require support, and a behavioral issues, but he requires support. Is there a public school that is geared towards children like that? He is 11, but functions like he's 2 years old, so he has intellectual disabilities.
Yeah, so the thing is, if you have a non-verbal child, you know, who has severe intellectual disabilities, is a bit of a tricky case. Normally, if you are assigned to the reference school, but if you feel it's not working in that reference school, there's not enough resources, to support him, that he has access to the curriculum and everything, the school requests the Ministry of Education for him to be, schooled in one of the resource centers or special needs units. They're called special needs units. Normally, it will be declined always in the first step, because the Ministry of Education wants to see why is it not working in the mainstream classroom? Like, what support do we need to give that school that child can be schooled in the mainstream setting? So normally in the first step, it's always declined. But then, you explain again why there's not enough resources, why you need to go to that special needs unit, and then you justify again, and you will most likely be transferred to that special needs unit. That normally takes a lot of time and a lot of nerves. If I've talked to a few parents, it's a bit of a hassle to get your child into one of those, just because Portugal is so focused on schooling everyone
Mainstreaming,
in the
right?
Yeah, exactly.
What about private schools, not international schools? What about private schools? Are there available private schools for a child, such as Sienna described? Would there be options to skip the public process and to pay for a school that would be supporting children with these needs?
Yeah, unfortunately not. So you cannot enroll your child directly into a special needs school. They are officially private special needs schools, but they are still ruled by the Ministry of Education. So there is no chance you can avoid that public route and enroll your child directly in a special needs school. Unfortunately, no.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, that's very helpful and creates a lot of clarity around that process. So, with the goal for Portugal to continue to move everyone into the mainstream, and that's their primary focus, with a situation like that, where you have a child that is nonverbal, for example, if they were in the States still and they're coming over, so let's say we know they have a 6-month ramp up, for example, can they start all of that from the state side so that they can go through the decline and then the paperwork and everything? Is that something like Alesco, for example, could help with? So by the time they physically arrived here, they'd be ready to go to the school that supported them?
As far as I know, but I have to say I'm not 100% certain on this point. As far as I know, in my experience, the parents and teachers I've talked to, you always have to be present to go through this route, because you have to prove, right, that it went wrong in the mainstream, in the public system, and you can only prove that when your child is there learning, right? So you can't do that. You always have to be there, prove that it doesn't work, and then you can apply for the child to be transferred.
So there's no option for them to take the proof from the home country that says that they were already in this and then transfer it. They have to kind of start fresh again within the school system. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's good to know. So Leah's asking about their 11-year-old with dyslexia. They're looking at international schools. Can you talk about what type of curriculum would work better for a dyslexic child? And I'm thinking curriculum, they may be referring to options compared to public and international, or within the international schools?
Probably within the international schools. I guess, you have Cambridge curriculum, you have the IB curriculum, all of those things. What I prefer for students with special needs is the Cambridge program, just because it's much more hands-on, it's much more project-based. And what I see, in math and also in English, when I look, especially, when it comes to the older years, you'll have an 11-year-old, if you look from year 5 onwards, it's like a spiral learning. You have the same topics every year, but they get deeper every year, which is so good for students with special needs, because you are used to the topics already. You just get deeper knowledge. Have that. You don't have to have another topic, and it's it just gets deeper and deeper, which is great. And I feel like that IGCSE, which is the external assessments in year 11, and the A levels, which is the assessments in year 13, are just a bit easier on the students. You choose certain subjects, you're able to learn for 2 years, then write the assessment. And IB is very hard on them in terms of you have to write big essays, which take a lot on the students with special needs, especially with dyslexia. So if you think of that ahead, when it comes to external assessments, I feel Cambridge is much easier on the students. it is a tricky balance for international schools to balance the support they're entitled to, but also to prepare them right for their external exams, because the external exams, doesn't matter which curriculum, Cambridge or IB, they don't give much when it comes to support. So you might get a bit of extra time. If you're lucky, you get an extra room, and someone to read the questions to you, but that's normally it. It's just a little percentage of what you're actually entitled to in Portugal. But because it's an international curriculum, there's no need, there's no obligation, to adapt it. The Portuguese curriculum, yes, of course, is obliged, to adapt the curriculum to the needs, but the international ones, as it is a choice, they are not.
Great. That's very helpful as well. So these questions are great. Jessica, thank you. Can you suggest a public high school that would be good for special needs kids? My 16-year-old's intelligence is at her academic level, but her reading and writing is many years behind. Thinking of moving outside the area of Porto, but willing to go anywhere that's best for my daughter.
Yeah. So, there's not an easy answer to that question, to be honest. There's not a specific answer I can give you for that. What I suggest is, because with dyslexia in the public schools, or reading and writing difficulties, it's a bit difficult because there is some support, from the resource centers and everything, but of course it's also limited to probably once or twice a week. So you have to get a little bit of extra support outside of the school, I guess, to support your daughter probably, and to that she's able to write the exams. So of course, bigger cities are better, than the rural areas, just because you have more therapists available, you have more specialized support, that you can go to, more extracurricular activities, which are so important to balance the students, to help with stress and anxiety, to so it's not an easy answer, and to be honest, I'm not a specialist for Porto, so I don't know, I can't recommend a specific school, but I would always look for the availability for therapists, to support.
And that's something that doesn't necessarily have to be confined. When we talk about urban areas and rural areas, I think a lot of folks, at least from the States, don't realize that there are some regions that are also still pretty extensively developed that don't necessarily fall in as the urban areas that we think about, like Luria, for example. Luria is a much bigger city than a lot of people realize. There's more in that region, and it is a nice balance from the biggest cities to a small town. But a lot of times gets overlooked. Viseu, for example, another city that has a university that has a lot of different things going on. So from our perspective, when we talk with folks, the big thing we're really working on is community support. Sorry, my dog's had a delivery. Community support and having people with like-minded situations that you can also have as resources, because I can't stress enough all these conversations about school support in school. If you feel isolated outside, you don't have other parents to talk to, you don't have community, it can feel really overwhelming. So really finding people in communities as well is a key, at least for us, has been a key part in helping people transition into Portugal.
Absolutely. Parent connection, is key, just to have another mom, another dad to talk to share your concerns often helps a lot already, and you'll always get that extra piece of information from a different person somehow. So it's definitely key to have your support system going. Yeah.
Definitely. And Alicia's asking this part immigration process, part education question. But if a student has learning disorders and autism and would struggle full time in college, have you heard of anyone being able to stay on the family's residency track by attending part time because of their abilities versus full time? And then she's saying she's going to look into the other certification options that was available. So I can jump in there from the immigration side if you'd like, and we can kind of tag team on this. So if your child has a medically documented diagnoses and with circumstances that show that they need to remain a dependent, that they are your financial responsibility, that they're unable to be independent, there's a variety of ways that that can be proved, and that you have a lot of documentation. So you definitely need all the documentation. It is possible to extend the amount of time that the child can be considered a dependent and come over under your residency. So that would work for a child that was diagnosed and unable, the doctors are saying that they still are not able to fully function as an independent in an independent living circumstance. It's the same if the person has a physical disability and you're the caretaker for them. There are ways to structure your residency application so that you're showing that they are an adult dependent. So on that side, there is options, and then I'll kind of toss it back over with you as well.
Yeah, so attending college, only part time. I have to be honest. Just there, I don't have an exact answer to that. I think it pretty much depends on the diagnosis you have, and of course you have to get it translated to Portuguese, and I'm sure it depends on the university as well if they can accommodate the needs or not. So I'm sorry, I don't have a super specific answer to that.
It's a complicated question. I would think if you have an adult child that is in that university stage and you have these concerns, this is when I would highly recommend hiring an immigration attorney, because now
Yeah.
so you absolutely can DIY a visa application. That's possible when it's straightforward. But when you get into the gray area, the possibilities of this or that, the money you will spend on an immigration attorney, we have great referrals. There's a lot of really great resources to find ones that specialize with families. That information and helping you navigate how you even get here on which visa and how to make sure your child has the best opportunity to thrive. Because if the only way to bring them over is on a student visa and they have to be enrolled in a full-time program, and now they've got the pressure of not only that they're a teenager and they have maybe some learning challenges that they're concerned about. Oh, and by the way, I have to do this to fulfill my residency. We've just added a whole other layer on top of an already stressful situation. So I would highly recommend, for complicated situations like this, having a professional immigration attorney review it and see if there's a way to create a dependency chain to show that they're still not able to be an independent adult yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Alicia's asking, what happens if a student takes the 9th year exam and then fails?
Luckily, you just repeat. You try again.
Okay.
You just try again. There's normally a lot of support that happens after you fail, and you get some support lessons. Of course, it's a bit better at private Portuguese schools or international schools, doesn't matter. But I think the 9th year exam, you're talking about Portuguese schools, you get support, and then you write it again.
I think it's interesting too when we talk about failing exams. When I first got to Portugal, 5 years ago, we made friends with some folks that had children that were still in high school, public school, Portuguese people. And I was introduced to their daughter, and their daughter was like 20. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean you're still? She had actually not passed her exams and was happily going back through, and well, maybe not happily, but she was going back through
Yeah.
and taking it again. And I've noticed there's not the same stigma in Portugal about the age that you leave school that there is in the States. In the States, it's
Yeah.
a like, oh, you were held back, you didn't graduate early. Like, there's a lot of stigma around the age when you leave schools at different stages. In Portugal, I've seen a lot of children come from the States and go back a year and give themselves a chance to settle in and not have quite the pressure. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common thing that is always done, of course, in agreement with the parents to maybe put a child 1 year back if it's possible. But it's much less stigma. It's much more. It's just like you want the child to succeed. You want the child also to be happy. It should be a good place, coming to school. And if that means, to be in school until you're 19, so what? You'll have your whole life ahead, your whole life to work. And I think it's more that Portuguese mindset is much more relaxed, much more easygoing, and it comes in handy, just when it comes to that point. Yeah.
But they definitely don't drop kick them out of the nest like they do in the States, where it's
No.
like, oh, you just
They
turned
might
18.
keep them too long. They might keep them too long, actually, in the home.
Exactly. So Leah's asking, are you able to recommend specific international schools that you would be good schools for our dyslexic son, looking into Lourinhã, Torres Vedras, Lisbon? Thank you. I'm going to take this for you because I know that that's not where we can be. So I'm answering this here, Leah, because there's all options here. But in this particular situation, we've asked our guests not to recommend specific schools on this because, one, that's what Alesco does. If you would like to work with them, they would do a consultation with you and deep dive into more details to help you understand what would be a good fit. And also because we don't want to look like we're promoting one over another on this. So it's trying to keep it to be more neutral. But I can tell you that the school options throughout all have pros and cons. There's a lot of different things you have to understand and compare and contrast. The schools in Lisbon, the schools in Sintra, the schools in Cascais, the schools in are very different than Torres Vedras and Leiria. They're very different than Porto. So this is a place where we either you really want to dig in and do your research, reach out to Alesco and have a deep dive conversation so that you can understand the curriculums and what they offer and how that could support your child. Take you off. I was trying to take you off the hot seat on that one because I know, Josephine, that's always hard. We're keeping you incognito right now because we're like, what school are you at? So Sienna's asking, in New York City, they have an education consultants for children with special needs to help parents navigate the school system because it's also complicated. Is that available in Lisbon?
Yeah, definitely. That's part of Alesco, part of the work of Alesco we're doing. It's an education consultant company. But for sure, there are other education consultant companies as well, who know the schools in Lisbon. As the public schools, they're referred by address. It's a bit hard to give you a specific name of the school. It's easier with international schools because those schools you choose, you apply for them, you apply for the enrollment, and you visit the school, you can go by, have a tour, you learn the pros and cons and all of this. And it's definitely helpful to have a consultant. I'm a biased person because I am a consultant, but it's just, especially if you come from outside, it's such a jungle to navigate. Really, I couldn't do it myself. When I would move fresh to the country, it's such a pro and cons and which area and where to move. So an education consultant can give you really the pros and cons of the areas and for specific schools that just help you to navigate all this.
And I want to stress here, because this is another complicated piece, and from Portugal to Places side, this is the other angle that we do. There's a budget. Finances play a big piece in this, and it can't be downplayed. It has to be. If you're in New York City, Sienna, I'm sure you're aware as well, that the budget plays a big part. The Lisbon urban area is a completely different rental market, purchase market, school market. Everything about that area has a different price point, different demand. Every neighborhood that would be suggested as a great opportunity for public school, for example, for international people, will also be being looked at by everyone. So the rental market's very tight to get close to that school, for example. There's a lot of variables. So it is something that you have to be aware that if you really drill down on one school because you heard this school was really good, but then there's nothing in that area to rent, it's hard. So there's a little cart and horse here, and you really have to sometimes try something, and then you may have to try something else. It doesn't always end up being the perfect fit the first time. We've had folks that have had to change schools, even under the best of interviews and expectations. Once they're in it, they found that there's something else that was a better fit later on.
True, absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes, you'll find out also what you like once you're there. You have certain expectations, but then only when you put it in practice, you feel like, oh, that's actually not what I like. Sometimes it takes time to figure out your likes and your dislikes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a lot. Lisbon urban area is a lot like New York City. There's a lot of similarities there. It's one of the major European capitals, one of the oldest capital in Western Europe. So it's got that vibe for sure. And there's a competitive space as well. And Jessica's asking about the schools. You do, yes?
Yes, exactly. So we do help families to find the right school. We have different packages you can choose from. That specific package, you're referring to would be the school shortlist. So, we have an interview with you, find out, where you come from, what are your likes, what are your dislikes, what are your expectations. And then normally, we do a school shortlist and give you can be anything between 3, 7, and 10 schools, depends on the area you choose, how many schools are available, and then you are given a short list of schools, and those schools, you can visit yourself, but Alesco also has packages where they help with school applications and school visits. So it's really on what you need, actually.
Yeah, and that's what we tag team with Alesco as well, because for us, a lot of times we can fill in on virtual people when they're not here. We can help go and identify neighborhoods, help with the school. That's all part of what we're doing to do the best we can to help you get the information you need. So there has been more than one time when we have come in and helped coordinate. You're picking between two schools and been like, okay, here's what's available in the rentals. Here's what this area looks like right now compared to that area, to help give you as much information as possible. It's a lot of moving parts when you move abroad. There's no way around it. There's just a lot of things, and some things you're going to get spot on. And no matter how much you plan, some things are not. You can guarantee that something is not going to work out the way you expect it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Jessica's saying that they only contacted a few international schools and private schools, but they all said they couldn't take your 16-year-old.
Okay, yeah. International schools and private schools, as I said before, they are not obligated to take your child if it has special needs, or also if it doesn't have special needs. What I found in Portugal, consistency is key. Sometimes it helps, to write another email, call another time, and to be fair, also if you can make it in person, it helps a lot, with your child. When the admissions office sees you in person, the person responsible for the school tour, they might ask for the special needs coordinator to be there. I always try, if I know a family is coming with a kid with special needs, I always try to be there to get an impression of the child, of the family. That helps a lot. And to put the formal diagnosis was just on the paper, to put into perspective, because you can write so much, and share your perspective, and a diagnostic report only says so much about a child. It's so important to see the child in person for the school to make a proper decision, and that does help sometimes. Even if they declined you already, it helps to go there in person, and show your interest and everything to go there. Especially, in the bigger cities, but across all Portugal, a lot of international schools have long waiting lists, so it's a bit tricky sometimes to get into them. But again, consistency is key, ask one more time, write one more email, and it does show the school that you are really seriously interested, and that you are, eager to support your child and find the right school.
Well, I think that's a great point about being seriously interested. Unfortunately, there are also placeholder people that will put a bunch of people on lists, different children. They'll take their family and be like, we're not sure if we want to live in Sintra or Lisbon or Torres Vedras. And they'll kind of apply to these different schools and kind of placehold or put themselves on waiting lists. And then they ghost the schools as well. They disappear. And I think the schools get a little hesitant. So I like what you were saying advice-wise about showing that you are keenly interested and that this is a serious proposition, not just a whim, a flight of fancy, if because we do have some folks that kind of breeze in and maybe don't realize what happens when you put yourself on 5, 6 different lists.
Yeah.
And then could you share the time frame of if you were going to visit in person, just like in the States, the schools close, they're down, they don't take visits. What do you feel is the best cadence for someone to come and do visits? What time of year? What would you suggest?
So that's actually really important, because most of the international schools, they open their admissions between February and April. So I would definitely try to visit in February and March, to get yourself a spot on the waiting list, or introduce yourself to the school, tour the school, if you like the environment, if you like where the school is placed and everything. So that's because those enrollments start then from February till April for the next academic year, So it's always better to be early, not too early, okay? Because then they forget about you in February already. If you visit in September, they forgot about you already. But February till April is definitely the best time to visit schools, yeah.
Perfect. And what do we do with the public schools? So if someone's coming over, how would the cadence go for visits to public schools? It's distinctly different.
Yeah, it's very different. So I don't know too much about the admission process in public schools because we have another specialist at Alesco who deals with that, you know. But you know, it's a bit hard to visit public schools, you know. You don't get a tour like you get in international schools just because you are, you know, you are there by address, you know. You don't get a special tour from the school normally, but you can always go by, have a look at the school, see where it is located. You know, you have your three preferences, you know, and you will most likely get one of those preferences. So I think, but I'm not sure on that. We have to, you know, I have to consult with our specialists at Alesco. It's more during the summertime where the enrollments are open and where you put your child in. But maybe you even know a bit more.
Yeah, we actually encourage folks to do their visits and their decisions. If they're renting or purchasing a property, we have an address. That's the most important thing. We have to have
Exactly.
a physical registered address. You have to show proof that you have that. And then that list of schools, then we get that information and we try to get people in and considering and documents and all the things that have to be done before the end of May, because by the second week in June, the public schools are pretty much unavailable for any kind of conversation, and then you're scrambling in the fall and you may or may not get in because of depending on the school. There's a lot of variables, and every school, public school for admissions, has a different requirement for records, notarization, all that different things. So if public schools are on your mind, then right now is the time that if you're looking for an address, if you're looking for a, you know, if you're looking to get the school, you have to have a location and address to actually get your child registered. Let's see. Kelly is asking, can Alesco help with finding enrolling in certification programs for a future university student and then structure a long-term education plan that keeps her daughter, ADHD, with us until her brain is more developed for independence? Estimate 7 years.
I do think we have, you know, someone at Alesco that helps with the, you know, finding the right university and help with all of that. When it comes to structure a longer term education plan, you know, I don't think Alesco helps with that just because we're more on the education side of helping and not dive too deep into school regulations. You know, that would be part of the school, part of the university that provide that. You know, we can always advise and consult and help the parents what they're entitled to, but actually structure the plan and everything, that's not part of our
And if I understand, you really focus on, you don't really go into secondary education as much. You're not in the university space as much as.
Exactly, yeah. I'm
Yes.
more the, you know, I'm a teacher by heart, you know. University is such a different field. It's more independent. It's more, you know, also more distant. You know, you have hundreds of students sitting in a classroom instead of 20. You know, it's a different state, yeah.
So I'm just going to say, and this is a compliment to Alesco, just to let you know, Kelly, if you want to reach out, we also have another partner that specializes just in university education. They work with folks for certification programs, universities, and they do very similar to Alesco, but they do it for people that have left the public school system. They've finished their exams and then they're looking to that next phase of education, even adults. So if adults are looking to go back to school, for example. So that might be a link that our team can get out to you, Kelly, to give you another option, because I know Alesco really stays focused with children, and correct me if I'm wrong, between like 5 and 18, correct? In that age?
Yeah.
Correct? Yep. Okay. Perfect. All right. So Megan is asking about Portugal public schools have extracurricular activities such as orchestra, sports, arts, etc. That's a great question, Megan.
Yeah. So as I said before, public schools are organized in those school clusters, you know, in those groups, and they are also responsible for, you know, organizing extracurricular activities. But normally, you know, they're a bit limited. What I advise, you know, go to your local football club, you know, go to your local arts clubs. There's so many local things, you know, and it's also good to connect with different children, you know, outside of the school and widen your support net. And you know, it's just more rich, you know, if you look outside of the school.
Absolutely. In a lot of communities, it doesn't even have to be the largest areas, have a deep amount of extracurricular. Alcobaça, where we're at, has a beautiful music school that's actually quite famous across Europe. It has football, handball, swimming. You have volleyball. Most towns of many sizes, from kind of medium on up, have the big gymnasiums with all kinds of programs, arts going on. There are a lot of things to do, and that's one thing Portugal, the place, will help with as well. If we have a child right now that's into gymnastics, and we found a house that put her within 20 minutes of a gymnastics school with a certified coach. We have another family that's into jiu-jitsu, and we had to find schools that had jiu-jitsu. They weren't as worried about the education part, but they wanted to make sure that jiu-jitsu was continued, so on and so forth. So it's all pretty possible here, except skiing. If you're into skiing, this isn't the country to go. But
Yeah.
I had those requests, and I'm like, yeah, you're not going to ski in Portugal. So that can definitely be ways to look at it. All right. So Kelly is asking, Emma is asking, what is the starting age for children in the first cycle of primary school? Is it 6? And if so, when is this taken from, for example, the 1st of September until 30th of August, or 1st of January until 31st of December? How would you go holding a child back a year at a mainstream school?
Yeah, so it is 6 years old, and I think it's you are in that year group if you turn 6 until December. I think December is the cutoff line, and it depends on your child if you want to hold your child back a year. Portugal has a 12-year system. I find even sometimes, kids do better in a 13-year system. So if even if you repeat a year, you would have those 13 years. If you hold back, you might finish 1 year later, but there's no law or whatever it says that you have to finish school at 18. What I see in my students who finish at 19, most of them are more mature. They know better what they want, what they don't want. They have bigger preferences of what they want in life. So I'm not too negative about holding a child back a year at a mainstream school. If they need that time to succeed in school and to be happy, that's the most important part, right? So what does a year make? It can make a huge difference in a positive way, and if you go into early, it might get a bit complicated, but might be also a good fit to start at 6. It really depends on the child.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's see here. I think Fiona's filtering through the rest of the questions and just making sure that we're catching everyone. I feel like this has been just a lot of information. I've learned a lot today, Josephine, as well. And for us, the question people are always asking is, how do I do this right? How do I make sure this is right? And I just can't stress enough that the right way is what works for your family. I personally don't believe there is one right way. I think it has to be
Absolutely, yeah.
what works best. I mean, it's the same for all of us when we move abroad. There is so many variables that can come into play, and you can only do the best that you can do. I mean, there's some things you're just not going to know until you get here. One thing before we start to wrap up, I get some questions. People ask me about not private, excuse me, teaching homeschool, being online, homeschool, having like an alternative to a public school or international school like that. What are your thoughts on that, and how does that work in Portugal?
Yeah, so we do have a specialist in Alesco, who is specialized in homeschooling and everything. But what I can say to the what's the special needs part, for some children it might be the right way. Especially if you are having sensory issues, if just the school environment is just too much for you. Sitting in a class with 25 students might just not work for you. Then homeschooling can be a good option. The laws towards homeschooling got better, each year in Portugal. It got a bit easier. You do have to register normally with a public school, and you do have to write the exams. But for children with special needs, they get more freedom, every year. And there are new laws introduced that some, depending on the diagnosis, again, on the case, you might not even have to write some of the exams. Otherwise, you would have to write the Portuguese exams at the end of each year. But it really depends a bit on the case. And we do have an amazing specialist at Alesco, who I'm sure can tell you a bit more about this than I do.
That's fantastic. So we're wrapping up. Are there any more questions? While we're wrapping up, let me share again. Here at Portugal, the place, we help folks with the relocation process, and we specialize in every bit of the move. But where we have professional partners are where we're getting into areas such as the education, getting your children enrolled in school. And Alesco, we've been partners with for years now, and it's been a really important part of people's journey here. So I can't stress enough that if you are with Portugal the Place, we can do a lot of the legwork, of course, get you that address to make sure you have a place to register. But we are not education specialists like Alesco. So we love partnering with them. Alicia is saying, I saw that the teacher had to be fluent in Portuguese to be allowed to homeschool. So that would rule out most of us immigrants learning the language as we come over.
I can't answer that, but because this is so specific, we would have to ask our homeschool specialist. But what I can tell you is if you have to write the exams, or it does come in handy, to speak Portuguese or at least to know the language a little bit. I think you have to prove a certain level of Portuguese. But again, this question I would have to refer to our specialist. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And then that's also, we've also seen where that's where the tutors have come in. That's where they've hired folks to support with that Portuguese element. Jessica, thank you so much for your questions. That's been great. And so if you are a current Portugal the Place client and you would like to have a referral to Alesco, we are happy to assist you with that. We can make the introduction. They do a consultation. It is a paid consultation. They get a deep dive. It's a very informative and helpful. So we're happy to make that introduction. If you're not working with Portugal the Place, we hope you will. But if you're not, you can reach out directly to Alesco right on their website, and the team over there, you'll be matched based on what your needs are. So, that's great, Alicia. I really hope you feel that there is a path. And if you need to talk with us here at Portugal the Place first to understand logistics and then head over to Alesco for the more deep dive consultation, you can do a consultation call with us complimentary, and then we can help you navigate all the next steps. So really excited to be able to share this. Thank you so much. This was fun. I learned a lot today, and I hope we can have you back again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And again, this is recorded, so we'll be sending this out as well so that everyone can have access to this. Thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.